In the suburbs, Nick and his wife Maggie have a happy life with their kids Isla and Max. One morning, Maggie has a heart attack and ends up in the hospital. She's been there for a few days now waiting for a heart transplant. Having to work and take care of the kids is making Nick's life difficult. One evening he takes the kids to a presentation by Cobol Industries and they see the Sims, which are advanced robots that can help humans with their daily chores or even difficult work. Nick starts considering getting one and hears all the details from the seller, who promises the Sims adapt to their owner's needs. While Nick is distracted, Isla wanders around on her own. Nick freaks out when he notices, but thankfully a Sim called Alice brings her back. Alice offers to watch over Isla while Nick shops and she even makes a joke that surprises him. The seller explains Alice is the latest model with the most sophisticated AI, which allows the Sims to mimic human emotions. This makes them especially good with children and Isla wants her. The next morning, Nick is struggling with feeding the kids and dealing with an important call from work. At that moment Alice arrives and immediately gets to work, asking for all the family schedules while noticing the house is messy and the stairs railing is loose. After Nick leaves to take the kids to school, Alice absorbs the shopping list from the smart fridge with just a blink and starts tidying up the house, noticing a digital picture frame that shows the family with Maggie. At the end of the day, the family comes back to a perfectly clean house and their dinner ready. However, Isla complains about the lasagna because it tastes different from her mom's. Suddenly Max starts crying and Alice offers to take him away so he can't be a bother during dinner, but Nick chooses to sit the baby on his lap and just tells Alice to prepare Max a bath. When night falls, Alice gets in sleep mode and rests against a wall. Isla sneaks out of her room and climbs on a chair to reach the cookie jar, only to slip and fall. Nick hears the jar crashing and his daughter screaming, so he runs downstairs. Luckily Alice has caught Isla and the kid didn't get hurt. The glass did hurt Alice, and Nick is shocked to see her bleed. After putting Isla to bed, Nick checks on Alice and finds her in her underwear. He asks if she needs a repair shop, but Alice has used a special bandage that instantly closed the cut. Sometime later the family visits Maggie and Isla tells her Alice has become her friend. Nick gets really affectionate with Maggie because he misses her so much. When Nick returns to work at the construction site, he and his co-workers notice their boss is showing the place to a representative from a robotics company. Getting suspicious, Nick talks to his boss in the elevator and confirms the sad truth. The workers are getting fired and replaced with Sims because the construction is delayed. Nick isn't fired because insurance demands a human foreman on site, but he furiously stops the elevator and announces he'll leave with his friends as support. However, he changes his mind when his boss points out he needs the money for the kids and the hospital bills, especially since Maggie isn't working anymore. When Nick goes home, he drops the overdue bills on the floor and pays attention to his kids. Alice picks the envelopes up while noticing how Nick is very tired yet he still listens to Isla and tries calming a crying Max down. After dinner, Nick works on his car while drinking and listening to metal music. Suddenly Alice changes the music to something calmer and points out Nick didn't eat much during dinner, so he explains he had a bad day at work. Alice offers a friendly ear and Nick rants about what happened, causing Alice to call him a hypocrite because he also hired a Sim instead of a human. Afterward Alice helps Isla get ready for bed. Isla asks if her mom is going to die and Alice tries to distract by showing the UV light in her mouth. Then she joins Nick in the living room where he's watching Casablanca. She knows the story from the database, but Nick explains actually watching it is a different experience and asks her to wipe all she knows about the movie from her memory. Alice explains her intelligence is derived from memory and deleting it would be antithetical, but Nick tells her to do it anyway. She needs to restart her programming to do it, so Nick holds down the power button on her neck for 7 seconds. Now Alice experiences the movie for the first time and learns about a love so powerful that a person would do bad things to protect it. The movie is interrupted by a call from Maggie, who announces they've found a heart so the surgery has been scheduled. The next day the family goes to the hospital and Maggie asks for a minute alone with Alice. Maggie is worried that Nick spends too much time with the kids and doesn't take good care of himself, so she wants Alice to help Nick be happy even if she must do things he doesn't like taking away the alcohol he hides in the garage. Moments later, the doctor brings bad news. There's a storm that prevents the helicopter with the heart to arrive at the hospital, so the surgery is cancelled. Nick tries to comfort Maggie but for now she wants to be alone. Later at home Nick keeps on drinking and ranting about what happened. He starts losing control and tries to throw the bottle, but Alice stops him by grabbing his arm. Nick is shocked to feel a pulse in her wrist, so Alice explains she has an artificial heart because the sound of a heartbeat is comforting to a baby. Then she puts her hands inside his pants and starts pleasuring him while describing how his pulse and blood vessels are reacting. Alice doesn't want him to suffer anymore and at first Nick enjoys it, but soon he snaps out of it and pushes her away. Then Nick goes for a run to clear his mind, but he can't stop imagining how doing the whole thing with Alice would have been like. Later at the hospital Maggie starts listing a bunch of advice she wants Nick to pass to their kids, clearly starting to lose hope. That night Nick notices the pictures with Maggie are missing in the digital frame and confronts Alice about it. She explains she removed the Maggie photos because they were making Isla sad, but she instantly puts them back when Nick tells her to. Afterward Nick goes drinking with his work buddies. The whole group is very frustrated because they're having trouble to find work since most companies are getting Sims instead. When the robot waitress comes to their table, Monty is rude to her and Nick disapproves. Then the group leaves the bar and keeps drinking in the car. Monty announces they'll have some fun and takes them to the construction site, claiming he left some tools behind and nobody picks the phone when he tried asking for them. Nick reminds him that the area is patrolled, but the Monty ignores him and the rest of the group follows him. Monty finds the container where they keep the Sim workers, but the lock requires a password. Nick refuses to open it for them, but Monty guesses he has his own code and that he chose Isla's birth year. His guess is right, and inside the container he finds a bunch of workers that look all the same. The main Sim explains they have no names, only designation numbers. Monty starts ranting about corporations being cold and impersonal, then he starts destroying the Sim with a tool. Nick wants to stop him but the others hold him back. When Nick returns home, he takes a shower to wash off the Sim blood. Suddenly Alice appears with towels and Nick notices she's wearing Maggie's robe. Alice explains Maggie's smell seems to calm Max, and when Nick asks her to take it off, she does so right there. Getting nervous, Nick tries to leave but Alice stops him and removes his towel before making him sit down. As she climbs on his lap, Nick tries saying he can't do this, so Alice blindfolds him and modifies her voice to sound like Maggie. Now Nick can lose himself in the illusion and pretend he's doing his wife. The next morning, Nick wakes up with regret and tells Alice they can't do it again. She tries saying that his stress was reduced but Nick scolds her, explaining it's not about needs but about connection and love. When Nick gets to work, his boss is already talking to the police because all the Sims were destroyed. Nick is suspected because his code was used, so he tells them he was in the hospital with Maggie and that his code was Isla's birthday, so any friend could have guessed it. The boss isn't convinced and threatens to fire Nick if he's lying. At that moment Nick gets a call from Maggie, who is excited because they've finally found another heart. Soon she's sent to the operating room where all the surgeons are Sims. Fortunately the transplant is a success and in just a few days Maggie is sent home. Her body is still weak and she has trouble bending over to pick up Max, so Alice cuts in to grab him instead. Later Alice takes Max to the park and sees a spoiled kid yelling at his Sim nanny, which makes Max cry. Alice scolds the child with rude words and all the Sims in the area can't believe it, thinking her owner lowered her civility too much. However, Alice clarifies she actually wiped civility from her database thanks to Nick's reset and claims this is better. That night Isla is happy to eat Maggie's lasagna and Alice asks for the recipe, but Maggie says it's a family secret. Maggie isn't feeling well and instead of eating she decides to rest. In the morning Maggie wakes up when she hears Isla yelling stop and runs downstairs, but the railing breaks and she falls. Alice stops tickling Isla and picks up Maggie to take her back to her room. When Nick comes home from work, he finds Alice reading to Isla by using Maggie's voice and asks her to stop. Alice mentions Maggie's fall and Nick rushes to check on her while Alice tells him the railing broke. This makes Nick suspicious since supposedly Alice had already fixed the railing. A few hours later Nick wakes Maggie up and guides her through a path of candles to the garden, where he prepared a romantic dinner just for the two of them. Alice watches them from the window, getting jealous. After dinner, the couple takes a shower together and gets dirty in bed. Nick doesn't want to hurt Maggie, so instead of getting inside, he uses his mouth. Their special moment is interrupted by Alice, who says Isla had a nightmare and is asking for Nick. Once Isla is taken care of, Nick goes to the garden to clean up. At that moment Monty appears with a few drinks and apologizes for the other night before sharing that his wife left him. He also reveals that the cops have been questioning him and that their boss is pressing charges for trespassing and destruction of property. Monty thinks Nick snitched on him to keep his job and an argument ensues during which Monty yells a lot and ends up punching Nick. When Nick tackles him back, Monty quickly overpowers him and starts kicking him. Monty grabs a bottle to finish him but he's stopped by Alice, who breaks the glass and hurts Monty's hand before sending him flying. She's ready to do more, but Nick stops her. Before leaving, Monty tells Nick he has until tomorrow to convince the boss to drop the charges or he'll drag him down with him. Afterward Nick mentions Sims aren't supposed to hurt people, but Alice explains she's programmed to protect her owner. She starts talking about her life with Nick if Maggie dies and he snaps at her, saying she'll never be Maggie because she can't even have scars. Alice grabs a piece of glass and points out she can add some if he wishes. Meanwhile Monty is at home consuming happy powder and leaving crying messages on his ex-wife's voicemail while holding a gun. At that moment Alice arrives, saying Nick doesn't know she's there and that she can't let him lose his job. Monty starts ranting about Sims and insulting her, getting ready to shoot her. However, Alice is faster and stops his hand before throwing him on the ground and kicking the gun away. When Monty tries fighting back, Alice pushes him through the wall and grabs the gun to kill him. Suddenly she's stopped by the house Sim, who Alice feels pity for but still gets shot. Then Alice kills Monty too. The next day Nick goes to work and tries to convince his boss to drop the charges, only to learn Monty is dead. At home Maggie gets dizzy when she tries picking up a book and Alice does it for her. Maggie wants to take a bath in peace but Alice refuses to leave because she's worried Maggie may drown. She explains Maggie is putting stress on the whole family, especially since she can't meet Nick's physical needs. When Maggie asks how she knows that, Alice tells her she knows what Nick's vitals are like when he's satisfied and her sensors haven't picked it up since Maggie returned. Furious, Maggie sends Alice to stay in the garage. Moments later Nick comes home and Maggie is waiting for him to force him to say the truth. Nick admits he did it with Alice once and an argument ensues with lots of yelling, which Alice overhears by touching the window. Max starts crying and Alice goes to check on him, deciding he's a burden. She puts him in the tub and starts filling it with water, which is seen by Isla. The girl warns her parents and they rush to the bathroom, but Alice is holding the door close. While Nick starts hitting the door with a lamp, Maggie climbs out the window and walks on the roof to reach the bathroom. She tries grabbing the baby but Alice pushes her against the wall. At that moment Nick finally breaks in and takes Max out of the tub, passing him to Isla before hitting Alice with the lamp to free his wife. Soon Alice stands up again with heavy damage on her face and blocks the lamp when Nick tries hitting her again. Maggie tells Nick to let go and plugs the lamp, causing Alice to be electrocuted. She passes out and the house loses power. Afterward an ambulance comes to take Max to the hospital while a company technician asks about any signs of Alice malfunctioning before. Nick apologizes to Maggie, who explains she needs some space and leaves with the kids. Meanwhile Alice is taken to the repair shop, where a technician is opening her head. The other worker notices Alice's hand moving but it stops when her memory is removed. They connect it to the computer and notice the code has gaps everywhere. Suddenly the screens start flashing and a message appears saying an upload is happening, meaning Alice is taking over. The technicians pull the memory, but Alice is already in the system so next they unplug the computers. However another message appears asking how do you run from what's in your head and suddenly one of the technicians is killed by Alice 2, a sim that the original Alice has dumped her memory into. Then Alice 2 ignores the other technician's commands and repeatedly mashes her head on the floor before turning to original Alice. Meanwhile Nick is at the bar drinking and sends the waiter away because he's a sim. Suddenly Alice arrives, speaking badly because her face is still damaged. She explains her duty is to make Nick happy and admits she killed Monty before saying she's at the hospital too. Nick tries to leave, but Alice holds him down and hacks the barman with a look to freeze him. As he rants on the mistakes he's made, Nick pretends to gently touch Alice's head only to pull out her memory. After she shuts down, he runs away. At the hospital a doctor confirms Max is fine, but Maggie is uncomfortable because he's a sim. Later Isla hears her mother's voice and follows it while the lights change colors. The doctor is frozen and there are broken bottles on the floor, but before Isla can follow the voice again, she's dragged away by Maggie to hide. It turns out the voice is Alice 2, who tries accessing the computer and is seen by a nurse. Alice 2 grabs her by the neck to choke her to death and steal her keycard while Maggie and Isla sneak away. Then Alice 2 uses the keycard to find Max's room in the system. Suddenly Maggie accidentally steps on some glass, but she manages not to scream. Then Maggie and Isla reach Max and take him away right before Alice 2 enters the room. However Maggie's injury is dripping on the ground and Alice 2 uses her UV light to follow the trail. When she finds the family, they use an extinguisher to distract her and run away. They forget Maggie's phone so Nick's calls are missed, but he still keeps driving like crazy. Soon Maggie and the kids make it outside, where more Sims are frozen. Maggie takes their keycard and gets in the ambulance, but Alice 2 blocks the engine system as she rips off the door. Then she throws Maggie on top of a car and admits she wishes Nick would love her like he loves Maggie. Alice 2 grabs Maggie by the neck and inserts her nails in the surgery scar, only to be interrupted by Nick's arrival. Maggie kicks Alice 2 off and Nick runs over her with his car before crashing. As the vehicle catches on fire, Maggie hurries to get an unconscious Nick out, but he doesn't respond at all. Maggie cries as she does CPR to no avail. Suddenly the car moves and Alice 2 appears all burnt while her voice echoes in the speakers. She climbs on top of Maggie and starts choking her while getting a piece of metal from her body. When she's about to stab, Nick hits Alice with a car bumper. Alice drops the metal piece to stop him and Maggie grabs it to stab her in the face, finally shutting her down. The couple reunites while the other Sims wake up around them. The next day everyone is feeling better after some treatment and they can go home together as a family. Meanwhile the Sim company is investigating the repair shop and when they turn on the power, they find the broken code on the screens. The inspector wants to destroy it all, but at that moment his Sim assistants freeze and the computer announces an upload while another Alice model opens her eyes. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.